Well, it's finally starting to feel like fall. The only trouble is that I think that is because of the hurricane that's currently on its way, so yeah. Hey folks, my name is Jen, and today we are going to do a video that is actually a very long time coming. I have been wanting to make this video for a while, but it's just been kind of difficult. It really shouldn't be. I think I've made it more difficult on myself because I really wanted to sit down and talk about my favorite books of all time. But because I tend to be, in case you haven't noticed, rather long-winded, I wanted to make a better video because I have 12 books that I count as my all-time favorite books. These 12 books have so much meaning to me. I love them so much. They are so special to me. They are the books, like, you could insult almost any other book out there, but if you said something snarky about these books that I count as my all-time favorites, I'm gonna feel some type of way about it. I might not be rude back, but internally I am gonna take it very personally. Yeah, these are like my top tippy top books of all time. Originally, what I was thinking was that I would just film a video and I would talk about these top books. But then the more I was thinking about it, the more I realized that because I really want to explain why these are my favorite books, and because I tend to be so rambly like I am right now, I knew that unless I made some type of script or notes for myself, first and foremost, doing that would take a while. I knew that trying to talk about 12 books and break down for you all why they are my favorites would probably be a couple of hours long. So I decided that instead I'm going to break them up into multiple videos, split up by genre. This also gives me time because I am also slowly rereading them to annotate them and write notes and better articulate why they are my top favorites. So these will all be coming out over time. This one right here that I am bringing to you, as well as I have another one that I hope to get out maybe in October. The rest of the year gets really busy, so I don't know if I will get to the other 3 videos this year. They might end up being like January, February, March content. There will be one about my favorite mysteries of all time, favorite classics, favorite horror, and favorite literary fiction / contemporary books. This first one is what I am roughly calling, this series is going to be roughly called Jen's Gems, because we love alliteration. And this is the fantasy and graphic novel edition. So we're talking about my favorite fantasy novel of all time and my favorite graphic novel of all time. Yes, I know the graphic novels are not a genre. They are broken up. They're like kind of like a category, but they're broken up into various genres. But that is just how I end up categorizing them in my brain. I know they're all different types of genres, but it's how I break them up and it's how I organize them on my bookshelves. So that's why this is kind of here, even though technically this genre is, I think, also horror, in a manner of speaking, or maybe fantasy? I don't know. Also, I'm sorry if you hear a lot of extra background noise. I haven't taken the window fan out yet. I should probably do that later. The wind's picking up outside, so don't mind it. So, first up, my favorite fantasy novel of all time, and I made like a little script for myself, so don't mind me if I'm looking around all the time. my favorite fantasy novel of all time is, and this probably won't be a surprise if you've been around here a while, but it's The We Free Men by Terry Pratchett. Well, I think that I have mentioned before, but this book was my introduction to Terry Pratchett and Discworld. I freaking adored it. This is also within Discworld. This is the first of the Tiffany Aching series. There are five books specific to Tiffany Aching, and in fact I think this series is like Discworld's like adult, except I think, and this is I think actually technically middle grade, and then I believe he has like one other book within Discworld it's also considered middle grade. I can't remember the name of it though, but yeah. So this book follows 9-year-old Tiffany Aching as she must ask the wild We Free Men, or the Nakmak for assistance in finding her younger brother, who has been kidnapped by the evil people, and bringing him back from fairyland. There is a lot that I really love about this book, but I think what I will focus on is 3 major points of what made this book an all-time favorite of mine. So, point 1 is the humor / social commentary. So the first thing to love about Pratchett is what was his at times ridiculous but always humorous social commentary. He usually picks something to satirize in each Discworld book, whether it be the education system, parts of government. There's a book that is, I haven't read it yet, but it's one of my friends' like favorites of Pratchett's, and it is Going Postal, and that is kind of like satirizing the postal service, and it's just, he usually picks something to poke fun at and play around with at the same time, and it's something that I really love about his books because, well, it goes into things with a lot of humor. At the heart of it, there's also some type of message that he is trying to get across about maybe a different way of thinking about things, or maybe something that's kind of broken about whatever system or thing that he's pointing out. And it's just really funny. With the We Free Men, what he is tackling is traditions, people's like preconceived notions, their assumptions about others and things, and also questioning things, the ability to question things and think for yourself. Traditions of the Chalk country, where Tiffany resides, are very conservative. The people there are very reserved. The hills are full of quiet people living their small little lives. They are mostly uneducated and do not see much use in educating themselves and their children being educated, when all the boys will just grow up to inherit their father's jobs, most of which are like agricultural in this area, and the girls will grow up to just become wives and mothers. So what's the point is the thought. Anything or anyone who is a little different is eyed with some amount of suspicion. The people themselves are alluded to as sheep, like the ones that they care for more than once, just kind of following along blindly with not much thought for themselves. Tiffany, however, is a little different. She's clever. She doesn't really accept things at face value, and this quote, for example, which is one that I really like. This is about fairy tales. So it's talking about the Good Child's Book of fairy tales. She says her mother read them to her when she was little, and then she read them to herself. And all the stories had somewhere the witch, the wicked old witch. And Tiffany had thought, where's the evidence? The stories never said why she was wicked. It was enough to be an old woman, enough to be all alone, enough to look strange because you had no teeth. It was enough to be called a witch. If it came to that, the book never gave you the evidence of anything. It talked about a handsome prince. Was he really, or was it just because he was a prince that people called him handsome? As for a girl who was as beautiful as the day was long, well, which day? In midwinter, it hardly ever got light. The stories didn't want you to think, they just wanted you to believe what you were told. I'm just gonna skip a little bit. She preferred the witches to the smug, handsome princes, and especially to the stupid, smirking princesses who didn't have the sense of a beetle. They had lovely golden hair, too, and Tiffany didn't. Her hair was brown, plain brown. Her mother called it chestnut or sometimes auburn, but Tiffany knew it was brown. Brown, brown, just like her eyes, brown as earth. And did the book have any adventures for people who had brown eyes and brown hair? No, no, no. It was the blonde people with blue eyes and the redheads with green eyes who just got the stories. If you had brown hair, you were probably just a servant or a woodcutter or something, or a dairymaid. Well, that was not going to happen, even if she was good at cheese. She couldn't be the prince, and she'd never be a princess, and she didn't want to be a woodcutter, so she'd be the witch and know things, just like Granny. I just really liked that because it's like it's kind of a different perspective on fairy tales. Now I've like gone into fairy tales and mythology a little bit in like school, and just because it's also something that's interesting to me, and I've watched others review them and talk about them in videos before, and it is kind of interesting to look at fairy tales, and they don't really leave a lot of room for you to think for yourself. Fairy tales, they're mostly just exactly what they were meant to be at the time, which was cautionary tales. Basically telling kids, don't think too much, don't be adventurous, don't wander off on your own, don't get into like different kinds of things because something or someone is going to try to curse you, eat you, or turn you into an animal. Stuff like that. It was meant to scare people and keep them in their small little places and not allow them to grow or adventure. Do stuff because we can't have that. That's kind of like fairy tales. And I mean also to entertain, but the old ones, especially the ones that have like the messy little endings, those were the cautionary tales. Or moral tales and stuff like that, and I just found that to be kind of fun and interesting. That is also in here and kind of talking about that, and Tiffany seeing that this just, she thinks about it. She thinks more about the messaging behind that. She knows things, and she's also desperate to know more things. She wants to learn, she wants to gain knowledge, and she wants to think for herself, not just, like I said, accept things at face value. Tiffany is also, in that way, very much like her grandmother as well, because she feels that it is her duty to protect the herd, i.e. the people, as well as the land and the actual sheep who graze on it. It is her duty. There is this one section which I think is what made me think, oh, not only is she kind of like a really cool character that I'm getting to know right now, but she's also fucking badass. She is having things explained to her about what is going on and why her brother has been taken and why she's like seeing things and whatever, and they're saying, hey, monsters are coming. Like, monsters are coming back. And she responds, why? And she is told, well, there's no one here to stop them. There was silence for a moment. There's me, said Tiffany. And I loved that. She's just this 9-year-old kid, but she's like, yo, Granny isn't here. Nobody is doing anything. I guess I'm here. I guess I'm the one who's got to step up and take care of business. And part of this also brings me into point 2, which is the witchiness slash being different. As far as like things go in here, I'm also thinking of a couple of his other Discworld novels that follow the witches of Discworld. But I think either Pratchett did. I don't really know that much about him as a person, other than he was a very sweet, cool man who unfortunately was gone like way too soon. But I think that he either did a good amount of research or he was very personally familiar with magical practices, as he has some pretty funny or insightful commentary about that as well. I'm mostly thinking of his other, like I said, his other Discworld books, but there's a couple of things that he says in here which just kind of struck me as funny, like this. The exploring of the universe is being done with a couple of twigs tied together with string, a stone, and a hole in it, an egg, one of Miss Tick's stockings, which also had a hole in it, a pin, a piece of paper, and a tiny stub of pencil. Unlike wizards, witches learn to make do with a little. Miss Tick, who is one of the main witches in here, did not look like a witch. Most witches don't, at least the ones who wander from place to place. Looking like a witch can be dangerous when you walk among the uneducated, and for that reason she didn't wear occult jewelry, or have a glowing magical knife, or a silver goblet with a pattern of skulls all around it, or carry a broomstick with sparks coming out of it, all of which are tiny hints that there may be a witch around. Her pockets never carried anything more magical than a few twigs, maybe a piece of string, a coin or two, and, of course, a lucky charm. Everyone in the country carried lucky charms, and Miss Tick had worked out that if you didn't have one, people would suspect that you were a witch. You had to be a bit cunning to be a witch. Once you learn about magic, really learn about magic, learn everything you can learn about magic, then you've got the most important lesson still to learn. What's that? Not to use it. Witches don't use magic unless they really have to. It's hard work and difficult to control. A witch uses her head. A witch is sure of herself. A witch always has a piece of string. There's more to witchcraft than string. A witch delights in small details. A witch sees through things and around things. A witch sees farther than most. A witch sees things from the other side. A witch knows where she is, who she is, and when she is. So that's just like some of what I found to be pretty, like, interesting, and some of it sounded a little bit similar in certain aspects to like actual practices that people have, but most of it is funny and just kind of absurd, which I also enjoy. Tiffany decides that she wants to be a witch because of something pretty terrible that happened. I can't remember how recently it was, but I think it was within the last year or so. Rumors had swirled about an old woman who lived by herself in the woods and had like a cat. And I think she also fed like the local wildlife or whatever. And the small-minded people were convinced that she was a witch because of this. They burned her house down, killed her cat, and basically because they destroyed her home, they left the woman to basically freeze to death in the snow. And Tiffany knew that, one, this was fucking wrong, and she was just a poor older woman who lived alone and never hurt anyone, and it was due to sheer ignorance that any of this had happened. And two, if her Granny Aching had still been alive, none of that would have happened, because Granny would not have allowed that to happen. Granny was like a voice of reason, and Granny would never have allowed it. So Tiffany decides that she will become a witch to ensure that nothing like that ever happened again in her chalk country. She feels like she has a duty, and I really love her for it. That brings us to point 3. Granny Aching. So I think the first bit that really broke my heart just a little was this passage here. You hardly ever saw Granny aching indoors in the spring and summer. She spent most of the year sleeping in the old wheeled hut, which could be dragged across the downs after the flocks. But the first time Tiffany could remember seeing the old woman in the farmhouse, she was kneeling in front of the fire putting a dead lamb in the big black oven. Tiffany had screamed, and Granny had gently picked her up a little awkwardly and sat her on her lap and shushed her and called her my little Jigget, while on the floor her sheepdogs, Thunder and Lightning, watched her in doggish amazement. Granny wasn't particularly at home around children because they didn't baa. When Tiffany had stopped crying out of sheer lack of breath, Granny had put her down on the rug and opened the oven, and Tiffany had watched the lamb come alive again. When Tiffany got a little older, she found out that Jigget meant 20 in the Yan-Tan Tethera, the ancient counting language of the shepherds. The older people still used it when they were counting things they thought of as special. She was Granny Aching's 20th grandchild. And when she was older still, she also understood all about the warming oven, which never got more than, well, warm. Her mother would let the bread dough rise in it, and Rat-Bag the cat would sleep in it, sometimes on the dough. It was just a place to revive a weak lamb that had been born on a snowy night and was near death from the cold. That was how it worked. No magic at all, but that time it had been magic, and it didn't stop being magic just because you found out how it was done. It's like the first real Granny memory in here, I believe, where she really just talks about her Granny and kind of reflects on things. And besides the, like, little bit that we're learning about Granny, it was just that part that they still use it when they're counting things they thought of as special. And she was her 20th I don't know. That got me right in the heart. See, I was really loving this book. Like, Tiffany was like a little badass, and I saw little bits of like my childhood self in her, even of like, you know, questioning things or reading a lot and trying to desperately wanting to learn stuff. Like, I saw those little bits, and I also really liked the humor. The humor was really great. I liked the little bit of action that had happened up until that point. But when that quote happened, like, I think that's about when the book started becoming really special to me. See, I was pretty close with my grandparents growing up, and I was especially close with one of my grandmothers. And she was this larger than life character to me, even though she was a little old woman, but to me she was just this totally larger than life person who has left a gigantic gaping hole in the family, to be completely honest. But she was this very forceful personality. She was someone who I liked to please. I loved to make her laugh. That was the best thing ever. And she's also someone you would probably cower from her disappointment. My grandma and Granny Aching are not honestly really that similar in description or temperament. They're very different. Granny Aching is a woman of not that many words, and my grandma could talk your ear off. But, you know, the way she held herself and the relationship that we had was fairly similar. Every passage that was a memory or connected Tiffany back with her granny, making her feel like, you know, she had a duty now that Granny was gone. Like, I really felt that in my soul. After my grandmother's funeral, it felt like this heavy weight that felt like it settled over my shoulders, that I had to remember the stories. You know, all the stories that she told me growing up, it was my responsibility now. I have to remember all of them. I have to remember the recipes and the different things. I have to pass them on. I have to make sure the family sticks together now that the glue is gone. Like, that kind of feeling. And to be completely honest, I can't say I've lived up to that duty. All grief is a very funny thing, in that it's not very funny, and everyone handles it way differently, whether you deal with it, you sit in it, you avoid it. Yeah. What I mean about this book is that it hit home for me. And part of this book makes me cry like every time I read it. Partly because it's so beautiful and it's so beautifully done. But mostly because I really connected with it so much. There's another passage that kind of touches on that just a little bit, where she's like wishing there was some sign of her granny still around, like, did I think she was still somehow walking the hills looking after the sheep? I want it to be true. I don't want to think she's just gone. Someone like Granny Aiken can't just not be there anymore. And I want her back so much because she didn't know how to talk to me and I was too scared to talk to her, and so we never talked and we turned silence into something to share. I know nothing about her, just some books and some stories she tried to tell me and things I didn't understand, and I remember big red soft hands and that smell. I never knew who she really was. I mean, she must have been 9 too once. She was Sarah Grizzle. She got married and had children, 2 of them in the shepherding hut. She must have done all sorts of things I don't know about. And I don't know. That just, yeah. While I was scanning through my tabs that I made in here, my annotations, the drawings, that, you know, when I was looking through it all, going through everything, in the process of writing up my notes for this video, it was honestly really hard to not just jump right back into the story, or just reread it all over again, even though I just finished rereading this not too long ago. There's just something about this book in particular. I cry every time I read this book. I cried while I was writing these notes up. I've mentioned it before, but I used to avoid things that made me sad. Movies, books, TV shows, etc. I ran from that shit so hard. Simply refused to experience any of it because of how much I abhor crying or crying in front of others. But at some point over the past couple of years, or honestly, probably because since I've been in therapy, I'm starting to get better with it a little bit. I still, like, do not go out of my way to seek out, like, tearjerker media. It's just not what I go for. But if a book makes me emotional, I don't hate it. I've actually come to count a lot of the ones that have made me emotional over the past few years. I've come to count them among, like, my favorite all-time books. You'll hear about more of them. This book, when I say I have favorite books of all time, and I've told you there's 12 of them, this one might honestly be near the tippy top of my list, which is something I didn't fully realize until I was making my notes. I've connected with characters in the past, from Ron Weasley to Mia Thermopolis, from Hannelore Ellicott Chatham to Belle, but the one who I relate to the most, I think the one that ends up being the most important to me, is probably Tiffany Aching. Also, I desperately need a film to be made about this, but I know that they will fuck it up. They will automatically fuck it up somehow. But yeah, I still hope that someday someone will make a film. There was a film in the works, but nothing ever came of it. But yeah, I love this book so much. My other favorite book that I'm going to talk about today, my favorite graphic novel of all time. It's funny, this answer actually changed because I actually thought this was, I knew that there were a couple of graphic novels that meant a lot to me, and I was just doing, like, some rereads and pinpointing down what I thought was going to be my answer for this, I was wrong. My favorite graphic novel of all time is Seance Tea Party by Raymond Yee. So, do you want to be absolutely delighted, but also have your heart rip right the fuck out of your chest? You should probably read this. This is a story about a girl named Laura, who is really scared of growing up. It's not like, you know, the Peter Pan kind of fear of like having to, you know, grow up and be really boring and then die. It's more of a fear of having to let go of the parts of what make her her. Those little bits of magic that make her life special. She doesn't want to let go of the fun, the toys, the quirky interests, the imaginary friends. She doesn't want to let any of that go. And one day she throws a seance tea party and reconnects with the ghost that lives in her house. This I connected with a lot. Not the ghost part, but the rest of it. Full disclosure, this is maybe an overshare and also something that's gonna make me a giant weirdo. But I held on to my imaginary friends until I was about 12 or 13. Basically, just about when I started junior high. So I was an only child who spent most of her time like outside of school, surrounded by adults or running through the woods alone. Just because of where I lived, there weren't any other, there were boys in my neighborhood, but they didn't seem to want anything to do with me, and there were no like girls my age in my neighborhood. And I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house, and they're in the boonies, and there were kids, but they were further away, and my grandparents wouldn't let me go hang out with them. I had to stay like on their acreage. So I spent a lot of time by myself. I mean, adults were obviously there and I hung out with them too, but a lot of the time I was there entertaining myself. So I made up friends to play with. By the time I was about like 12 or 13, I wasn't really honestly playing with them that much anymore. We weren't running around fighting monsters or playing whatever other stuff. I wasn't really playing that kind of stuff anymore by the time I was that age. Up until then, it was more along the lines of just going for a walk in the woods and having somebody else to bounce ideas off of or complain about my day to, or complain about my family, or complain about whatever I was complaining about. I just had, albeit fake people, I had somebody else to talk to, as odd as that might sound. Because I, at that age, I think I was also afraid of growing up. I was afraid to let go of these people, albeit imaginary people, who had been with me for so long. And it just felt like as soon as I did that, I lost the magic. And that is exactly what it felt like. As soon as I did basically stop having those friends, it did feel like I lost the magic. I couldn't play anymore or make up intricate stories with Barbies or stuff like that. I still daydreamed a lot. I still had an imagination, but it was more, I started writing things down more, I guess. Maybe that, I've talked about this before. I actually wrote a couple of essays on it in college when we were supposed to talk about what made us writers, and I think that's largely part of what made me a writer was having to entertain myself for so long. It just kind of developed my imagination. Only at some point along the way I had to like not play it out. I had to write it down, the things and the scenes and the stuff that I had in my head, you know. But at that point, you know, I kind of lost that magic. I was officially a teenager. I was too old for it. and it ended up leaving me feel pretty sad there for a while, you know, until I got caught up in friend drama and bullshit and all that, you know, stuff. Since college, I've been trying to like capture a little bit of that magic back into my life. I've heard more than once over the years that it's really weird to have some of the interests that I have to collect childish things like Funko Pops or stuffies, or, you know, to hold on to old and new things is kind of childish or makes my house look like a college dorm, or I don't know, it just seems kind of immature overall. I'm still working on the other part that comes with getting older, which is not really giving a fuck about what other people think, so, you know, eventually we'll get there. My long-winded point is that there was a part of me that really connected with this book so much on that level. Like, you'd have to ask old classmates of mine if I was a weird kid growing up, but I definitely, I know I got a few odd looks at college. Not from like the people who I became friends with, but just other people in my class. If you use 2 of your 3 speeches in public, in your public speaking class to talk about A, model trains, and B, cryptids, especially Champ, the Lake Champlain, like Vermont version of the Loch Ness Monster, you're gonna get really weird looks. Laura is weird. She is quirky. She likes spooky things, and I fucking love her for it. This is a character that if she was real, we would have definitely become best friends in like junior high. She held a seance tea party to invite a ghost to hang out with her for Pete's sake. Although, you know, that's you know, it is brave. You will never catch me using a Ouija board, let alone making one myself, because I'm too much of a chicken shit. But she's cool like that. Laura does end up like growing over the course of the book with the help of her ghostly friend Alexa, who is trying to remember bits of her past, her life, the growth, the artwork, oh my god, the artwork in here is just incredibly beautiful. Some of this, absolutely freaking gorgeous. The colors, the art itself, the expressions on people's faces, it's so stinking beautiful. And the messaging in here is just, growing up is really scary. And honestly, I think all of us who are grown-ups, technically, I think we're all mostly just faking it until we make it. I still have no idea what the fuck I'm doing half the time, and I have heard that exact same sentiment spoken by adults both older and younger than me, that none of us really know. We're all just making it up as we go along. One thing I think that holds firm for growing up, though, is that you don't have to let go of things that you love. I mean, obviously, if something's not healthy for you, you should probably consider letting go of it, of course. But just because you are an adult doesn't mean you have to, like, give up on all of the fun things that you love and just be, like, what? Boring and play Parcheesi and file your taxes and watch the news all the time. You don't have to, I mean, unless those are things that you like doing, but it doesn't mean that you have to let go of your favorite interests. If you're a spooky kid, hell yeah, be a spooky adult. I know a lot of spooky adults, and they are really fucking cool. Just, the thing is to try to find your people. The people who are into the same things as you, or if they're not into the same things, they still love and appreciate you for you and all your weirdo glory. I know it took me a long while, but I eventually found my people. I actually found so many. I think I've got like 4, I guess, technically, with y'all. That's 4 different friend groups at this point, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, anyway, this really long-winded thing, this just to mean that I really connected with this book. It touched a part of me that I thought I'd pushed to the side, and it also warmed my heart and then bashed it into a million damn pieces. I recommend this for any time of the year, but reading it around now makes it feel extra special. If any of this sounded appealing to you at all, please, 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 please do check out these two books. I love them so much. I feel like maybe I've overshared a little bit too much of myself in the process of talking about these books. I just wanted to fully explain why they mean so much to me and why they are amongst my ultimate top favorite books of all time. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Like I said, this is the first of what I think will be about 5 videos broken up by genre. I think the next one will be my 3 favorite horror novels, which I'm hoping to come out with in October. Maybe near the end of the month. Hopefully for Halloween, possibly. Let me know if you have read these books before. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for always watching. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.